One of the most fundamental game mechanics of a 2D platformer is being able to move and jump. A good platformer needs to have tight and simple controls so the player can get fully immersed. Hi, I'm ShadowGlitch, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make a simple character controller for a 2D platformer using Unity and C#. By the end of this video you should have a player character who can move left and right with the arrow keys and jump when the spacebar is pressed. First things first, we need to create our Unity project. Let's open up Unity Hub and click the New button to create a new project. Give the project a name, anything will work, and make sure that the template is set to 2D. I would also suggest that you save your project in an easy to find location. Next, hit Create to open the project in the Unity editor. Once your project is open, right click the hierarchy and create two empty game objects and name them Player and Platform. On the player game object, right click and under 2D objects create a new square sprite. You can use any sprite or image for your player character, but for the purpose of this tutorial I'll be using a simple square character with two square eyes. On the platform game object, click add component and then go to sprite renderer. By default no sprite has been declared, however you can change that by picking a square. Then duplicate the platform so we have at least two platforms in our game scene. If we press play now, then nothing happens, and the player just hovers in midair. That's because we haven't added any gravity. On the player game object, click add component and add a rigid body 2D. Make sure to click rigid body 2D and not just rigid body. Make sure that the body type is set to dynamic, and then let's hit play again. You'll see now that the player is now affected by gravity, but now he'll just fall through the platform. That's because we haven't added any collisions to our objects. Let's change that by stopping the game and then giving each object in our scene a box collider 2D, not a box collider. Note, a quick way to give new components to more than one object at a time is by selecting multiple objects in the scene in the hierarchy when you click add component. You might have to resize the collider if it doesn't match your sprites. Now if we hit play, the player will fall until it collides with our platform. Brilliant. Next, we need to make it so that the character actually moves when the player presses either the left or right arrow keys. In the project window, right click and create a new C# script and call it something like player. Double click the script to open it up in your script editor. Once your editor is open, you'll want to create three variables. A serialized private float speed variable which will determine how fast our player can move, a private rigid body 2D variable called RB which will be used to find the rigid body on our player object, and a private float input variable which will be used to detect player input. Then in our void start function, let's type RB equals getComponent rigid body 2D. This will make our RB variable the same as the rigid body 2D component we added to our player earlier. Below the void update function, let's create a new function called void fixed update. In it, type input equals input.getAxisRaw brackets horizontal. Then underneath, type rb.velocity equals new vector2 brackets input times speed, comma rb.velocity.y. Make sure to save the script and let's head back into Unity. Add the script onto the player game object and make sure to set the speed. Hit play, then you should be able to move the player left and right by using the arrow keys or A and D. However, you'll notice that while the player is moving, they're only facing right, and we want our player to face the direction that they're moving in. So let's head back into our script and create a new private bool variable called isFacingRight and make it equal to true. Then below our void fixed update function, let's make a new function called void flip. In it, type transform.localScale equals new vector3 brackets minus transform.localScale.x, comma transform.localScale.y, comma transform.localScale.z. Then below that, type isFacingRight equals not isFacingRight. Inside our fixed update function, let's make an if statement. In it, we will check if input is greater than 0 and isFacingRight equals false, we will then call our flip function. Then else if input is less than 0 and isFacingRight equals true, we will then call our flip function once more. Let's save our script, head back into Unity, click play, and the player should now face the direction they move towards. Fantastic. Finally, we want our player to jump when the spacebar is pressed. Let's head back into our player script, and we need to make 5 new variables. A private bool variable called isGrounded, a serialized field private transform variable called checkGround, a serialized field private float variable called checkJumpRadius, a serialized field private layer mass variable called whatisGround, and a serialized field private float variable called jumpForce. In our update function, type isGrounded physics2d dot overlap circle in brackets check ground dot position, comma check jump radius, comma whatisGround. Below that, we are going to make an if statement with a condition of input.getKeyDown keycode.space and isGrounded equals true. This will check both if the spacebar has been pressed and if the player is currently touching the ground. Then inside the if statement, type rb.velocity equals vector2.up times jump force. This will be the line of code which propels the player into the air. Save your script and head back into Unity. But before you press play, we first need to assign our variables. Select both the platforms, then at the top of the inspector, click the layer drop down and click add layer. A list of different user layer slots should appear, and in an available slot type ground. This will add a new layer. Then select both platforms once again, go to the layer drop down, and you should now see a new layer called ground. Click it and both players should now have the ground layer. Then on our player script, we want to click the drop down next to the whatisGround variable and click ground. Next, we want to right click the player in our hierarchy and create a new empty game object which we will name groundCheck. Then in the inspector of our groundCheck object, click the big cube and click the red rectangle which will give it a gizmo. You should now be able to see the groundChecked object represented by a red rectangle. Move the groundCheck object near to where the player's feet should be, then drag the groundCheck object into a slot on the player script which says check ground. Now all we need to do is assign the values of both our check jump radius and jump force variables. Don't just copy my variables, otherwise you may find that the player may not jump high enough, or maybe that he can jump without touching the ground. You need to tweak the variables to suit your project. Also, make sure that on the player's rigid body 2D, under constraints, that the Z checkmark is ticked. Otherwise, you might get some weird instances where the player will rotate while midair and fall on his side. You should now have a fully functioning 2D character which can move left and right and jump in midair when the spacebar is pressed. Congratulations! Next video, I'll be showing the different ways we can expand on our jumping mechanic, such as having the player hold the button down to charge for a higher jump and having the player jump again while in midair. If you want to see more of my content, be sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. To further support me, consider checking out my Buy Me a Coffee page to become a member or just leave a one-time donation. Every little helps. Thanks for watching.